welcome to those of you who are joining us on YouTube or Facebook. We have a little bit of dinner church chaos happening right now, but I'm wondering if anybody thought of a movie that stood out to you of a betrayal scene. Anybody? What? What is it?
Miraculous.
Miraculous? Somebody betrayed somebody?
Oh,
I don't know which episode that was. What did you think of that? Anybody else have any others that they thought of? Oh, yeah? Oh, Lion King is a... That is a big betrayal. Ooh, that's awful. Scar, he killed him. He killed his brother, Mufasa. Wait, no. Mufasa. Yeah. Ooh, that one was kind of cut. Yeah. All right. Well, so I remember Ruth. Yes, another betrayal scene. The Jesus movie. Oh, what a great segue. Oh man, yeah, we are going to talk about a betrayal in the Bible today. We're in a series called Struggle to the Cross, and Jesus became human and experienced the whole human condition, all of it. It didn't skip the painful or the suffering parts, and joined us in our human condition. I remember when I was a kid, we lived in a house, and now this was the late 80s, so my parents were, I don't think parents do this much anymore, but my sister was about 8 and I was about 6. She's 2 years older than me, and my parents ran out of bread. And we could ride our bikes. I still had training wheels, but my parents said to us, and I still remember, they said, hey, could you two girls go up to the grocery store, get a loaf of bread and come back, ride your bikes. And again, I'm 6, my sister's 8. And the grocery store was like up the hill and then like out of the residential neighborhood and about 3 blocks that way. And so I remember feeling so proud when my mom handed $1 to my sister. I wasn't even the main one that got the responsibility. But I was determined to do a really good job to go get that bread and bring it back home and show them how grown up we could be. And I still remember when we got the bread. It was really my sister that did it all, but I felt really proud that I was doing it too. And when we were coming back down the hill to our house, my sister had the bread and it got caught, the plastic bag got caught in her wheel. And I remember watching the bread fly up in the air and it all fell on the ground. And I was so devastated because I so badly wanted to follow through with and do a good job with what my parents had entrusted us to do. And so my sister was upset. She went home, upset. And I remember sitting there being like, well, this bread didn't touch the ground. It's on another piece of bread. And so I like stumbled home with like 3 like chewed up looking dirt pieces of bread. Because I so bad wanted to do what they wanted us to do. And today, Jesus had a task to do that God sent him for. And Jesus also called disciples to follow him and gave them tasks to do. This Jesus, who was God, remember, didn't have to do any of this. Chose to put aside the privileges and the power that came with being God and made an intentional decision to put on flesh and experience everything that we experience in all the parts of our lives. And so many we're still wrestling with, and this is a question that comes up often, over and over again. How does the cross save humans? How does what Jesus did and the work Jesus did actually save us? Did Jesus, I hear people ask, did Jesus really have to suffer and die? That's just a weird part of the Christian religion that a lot of people are like, why? Why is that part of it? And just in this one chapter in Matthew 26, we've already seen Jesus face what we as humans face all the time, adversity. You remember that? When people were just against him. He didn't do anything wrong to them, but they were against him. And then we saw Jesus in the last one we talked about experience being misunderstood, that pain of being misunderstood that we experience too. And then today is probably like the most heart-wrenching of all as we read on in chapter 26. It's the pain of betrayal. So I invite you to follow along with me, Matthew 26, verse 14. Then one of the 12, the one called Judas Iscariot, went to the chief priests and asked. Now, did they come to him? He went and sought them out. Do you remember what just happened right before we started reading this verse from last week? Anybody remember? He was mad, indignant, angry about something. Remember what he was mad about? The waste of the perfume. How dare Jesus defend this woman? He thinks he knows better what to do with that money. So he's still mad, and it just kind of was the straw on top that broke the camel's back. And he went to these chief priests, and he said to them, "What are you willing to give me if I deliver him over to you?" So they counted out for him 30 pieces of silver. It's interesting because this is the exact price listed in Exodus of a slave in that culture is 30 pieces of silver. They're going to give him the slave's price. From then on, Judas watched for an opportunity to hand him over. So very calculated and intentional. Suzanne Collins, who wrote The Hunger Games, says that for there to be a betrayal, there has to have been trust first. Otherwise, it doesn't feel like a betrayal, right? Betrayal is exactly that, a violation of trust. And betrayal is different than someone simply failing to do what they were supposed to do. Like my sister and I trying to get that bread home. We just failed, right? Betrayal has intention behind it. Brene Brown argues that the more intentional an action is perceived, the more hurtful it feels. If someone's really, really trying to hurt you, trying to betray you, trying to take you down, trying to deceive you, and you find out that, then it's even more hurtful. So if that's true, then betrayal is probably one of the worst ways to hurt one another, right? Because it's not just the action of betrayal itself that hurts. It's also the intent behind the action, right? So have you ever been betrayed by someone close to you? I have. It hurts. It's like the ground beneath me is completely crumbles when I have been betrayed by someone close to me. Studies have shown that betrayal is a prevalent and profoundly damaging form of trauma. Like people who experience deep levels of betrayal experience and exhibit trauma symptoms. Deep betrayal for me was like a world-shattering kind of experience, and it shook up my whole entire system of trust in a safe world and a good God. Anybody been there? That can all come into question. So before we talk about betrayal, let's talk about trust. Judas was the worst, right? Like he's arguably like the most despicable, can say that word, Bible character that there is. He is the disciple who completely blew the trust that Jesus had placed in his closest friends. And we often think about people putting their trust in God. How many of y'all believe God is trustworthy? How many of you have put your trust in God? Yeah, and trust, by the way, and your faith, every time you read faith in the New Testament, pisteuo, it is a word that includes both attitude and action. It's not just attitude or something you believe. I'm counting on this person, so I'm going to do this because I'm counting on them to be there. And there seems to be a million verses about us, humans, putting our faith and our trust in God. But trust ever go the opposite direction. That's what I'll talk about today. Like God putting God's trust in humans. Like, oh, that feels weird, right? That's not the typical direction we usually talk about trust going. But turns out there's lots of verses about that as well, and I put several of them on your handout for you if you want to look those up when you get home. That God is in this mutual, trusting, and loving relationship with humans because God chooses to be and puts God's trust in us. There's also the parable of the talents, where He gives bags of gold, trusts those servants to use those resources for the kingdom. There's also there's other parables about that. And so theologian Teresa Morgan, I've been reading her book called Trust and Atonement. It's really, really good. She calls that kind of trust, the kind that goes from divine to humans, therapeutic trust. The reason she calls it therapeutic trust is because it's a risky kind of trust. Humans, a lot of times, do not get it right. And so when God, the divine, puts that kind of trust in a human, it can be therapeutic because it gives us encouragement. If God is trusting me to do this, maybe God thinks I can, and it helps us to follow through. And she goes on to talk about that kind of therapeutic trust. I think about my mom giving my sister the $1, because back in the 80s, bread was not $1. And that in and of itself, like, my parents are smart people. My parents, if they trusted us to do it, then we probably could have done it, right? That kind of therapeutic trust. Orthodox Christianity teaches that Jesus was at the same time both truly human and truly God. And Jesus puts his trust in his disciples and in his friends, his human friends. For him to fully experience the pain of betrayal, there had to be trust first. A study done in Baltimore spoke to employers about whether they'd hire ex-offenders. And the employers that wouldn't hire ex-offenders reported that they viewed them as untrustworthy and that they had a tendency to violate established laws and boundaries. Therefore, they would not trust them to work for them. They would not hire them. And I wonder, if we were honest with ourselves, would you hire a formerly incarcerated individual for your company that you'd invested all your money in, trying to make a go of it in the business world? Studies also showed that when employers did give ex-offenders opportunities for jobs, they typically responded with trustworthiness. And they were much less likely to reoffend, and they also adjusted better to civilian life. It's an example, sort of that idea, anyway, of therapeutic trust. Then they studied a community reentry program that I read about that hired ex-offenders to work in a nursing home. So they paired together frail and elderly and vulnerable senior adults and hired ex-offenders as the workers for the nursing home. And at first, the residents acted a little nervous and skittish around the workers, but the whole thing worked really well because they spent time together. They soon developed a mutual trust in one another. And one of the residents, there's a story that when the resident handed $300 cash to one of the workers and asked him if he would go deposit that in her bank for her, the worker went to the office with tears in his eyes with that $300 and said, "No one has trusted me like this since I was 13 years old." The therapeutic trust, this person believes in me. And coincidentally, that program was so successful that 93% of the workers in that community reentry program at that nursing home stayed out of prison and never reoffended. 93%. But the line between commitment and betrayal can be a really thin one. Am I right? It can go either way, especially when we're dealing with faulty humans, right? And God knows this, and God still chooses to try to have relationships with humans of mutual love and mutual trust, because God knows that relationship is the only thing that is going to save us. The only thing. So let's talk about Judas and these disciples. Judas went and made a dirty deal. And when Judas came back, I'm not going to read it to you, but it's on your handout if you want to read it later. There's a scene that happens right after that where Jesus is eating with his disciples. Now, in the ancient world, you didn't just eat with anybody. Sharing a meal with someone in Middle Eastern culture was not something you did with people that you did not trust. Again, this idea of mutual trust. Meals were exclusive events, and they even, it's still kind of an important part of this culture that they didn't sit around tables and eat with just anyone. If you shared a meal, you were showing mutuality, you were showing reciprocity, you were showing friendship, you were showing loyalty. It's almost like we've eaten together now. So I got your back and you got mine, right? Like if something comes up against you, I got your back. It is a covenant of trust. And Jesus, during this Passover meal, sadly says to them, truly I tell you, one of you is going to betray me. Which is really jarring because that's the exact opposite of what they're all doing by eating together. One of you is going to betray me. And then they go around the table and they're like, surely not I, Lord. Surely not me. It's not me, right? Surely not I. And Jesus continues with this meal. And he breaks the bread. And he says, as we share this bread together, I want you to know this is my body that I'm giving for you. And then when he gives thanks and blesses the cup, he says, truly I tell you, I want you to drink from this, all of you. This is my blood of the new covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins. I'm still offering this relationship. I'm still offering this covenant to you. You trust me with your lives, and I'm putting my trust in you. Jesus turned this exclusive event into an inclusive event on the off chance that these humans will choose faithfulness this time around. All are invited. That's one reason why we have an open table. Jesus is still pursuing that kind of loving relationship with all of us. And we have to remember too, if you've read this story before and known this story like so many times in your life, at this moment in time, the verdict was still out. They hadn't read the end yet. The verdict was still out. What if Judas had taken that therapeutic trust Jesus put in him and changed his mind? What if he went back to those chief priests and teachers of the law and said, you know what, deal is off. I decided I am not going to betray my master and my Lord. As a matter of fact, I will die with him if I have to, because that's what we just did. We made a covenant of trust. What if he had done that? But that's not how the story goes. Once again, humans let God down, broke trust, broke the covenant. And the story unfolds as we know it to unfold: the arrest, the torture, all of the things when Judas sold Jesus out. You know what I feel like, though, I would have done if I was Jesus? After Judas followed through with his betrayal, one of my closest friends, because I know that pain of betrayal, at least to some extent. I feel like if I were Jesus, if I were God, I think I would have said, I've had it with you people. Like, I am so done trying to have a relationship of love and trust with you. I think about the whole Old Testament and all the covenants that were made. God kept God's side, but the people broke them. And now Jesus is here in the flesh, and he's getting betrayed again. And I think I would have just said, you know what? I'm out. Y'all suck. You'll figure it out on your own. Just if you want to just hang out together, beat each other up, be violent to one another, I'm out. I'm going to fly off to create some new universe somewhere else, and I'm going to go full on no contact with you guys. That's what I feel like I would have done in that moment if I had experienced that betrayal. Because God didn't have to continue walking down this path. But God does not do that. I think that's miraculous. Jesus shows us that there is nothing human beings can do that put us beyond God's trust or confidence in our ability to respond to God. There's nothing you can do that will make God run away from you. There's nothing you can do that will make God go full on no contact. There's always a possibility for human beings to respond to God. And if you ever get a little voice in your head that says, I have sinned too much, God is done with me. There is no way for me to come back. I'm telling you, that is a lie straight from the pit of hell. There is always redemption available for you. And we go back to our question, why did Jesus have to die? Friends, Jesus dies because he cannot be other than who he is. Jesus is faithful. And he is someone who is always trustworthy and trusting, and whose work it is to restore that broken trust between God and humanity. And his death demonstrates the lengths to which God is willing to go to continue to offer and extend that relationship to us. And the constant hope and optimism that these fickle human beings God created will love him back one of these days. When Judas betrays Jesus, Jesus refuses to be drawn into that cycle of the vicious cycle of failed trust. You know what I'm talking about? Where suffering and loss of trust often lead to harming and abandoning others, and then it just fuels more hurt and more suffering. And by breaking this cycle, Jesus disrupts what people will understand about how relationships work. It's a fire break. At 1 Peter 2:23, it's on your sheets too. When they hurled their insults at him, he did not retaliate. When he suffered, he made no threats. Instead, he entrusted himself to him who judges justly. He himself bore our sins in his body on the cross so that we might die to sins and live for righteousness. For by his wounds we are healed. Jesus shows humanity that cycle can be broken and changes humans in our sense of what is possible. This new basis for relationships. At any moment, when human beings choose to respond to God's therapeutic trust, we begin to exit this world of wrongdoing and enter into a new reality that Christ made for us. And in this moment of extreme injustice and cruelty, Jesus endured horrific trauma because he is faithful to his side of his covenant with humans. And he shows us that neither death nor life, nor angels nor demons, not the present nor the future, nor any powers, neither height nor depth, nor anything else in all creation will be able to separate us from the love of God that is in Christ Jesus our Lord. So I invite you to, if you want to share, what are your thoughts about this story? This idea that trust is a two-way street. We're getting ready to share the meal with Jesus that Jesus invited us to. So if George would come forward and the musicians, then we can do that. And I will say a prayer over the elements for us.